Welcome back. You're now watching the political segment on the weekend show. Oftentimes, people talk about what they want the government to do for them. They talk about their problems. They talk about the needs of the people. They talk about the responsibilities of the elected officials. However, on this show, one of the balances which we bring is the fact that what are the people doing? How can we make things better? I'll give you a good example. In February 2023, when we had the last elections, we saw a lot of conversations that worried me on social media, a lot of bullying, and these are young people who always point fingers. And at this point in time, it wasn't a case of anybody being sponsored to say this. We now started going above and beyond, and maybe that's youth participation in politics and government. However, we've now seen it across board, even in the financial space or in the economy, where at some point, February, March, people were complaining about the price of dollar to naira,
Yeah.
and everybody was hyping up their prices. Now that the government has done its best to stabilize the naira, most products in Nigeria that were priced high haven't gone down. It begs a major question: what are we as a people doing? How are we trying to fix the nation when most times we always point fingers, but fellow Nigerians are the ones affecting Nigerians? Which is why citizen engagement and leadership is a conversation which always comes up, because people talk about you have the family as a background for socialization. You have to have a leadership figure. What are we doing? Joining us, we have a guest who I have followed over the years, from days campaigning for Not Too Young to Run, to her being actively involved in politics, for her working within the space, and now having a leadership position to champion citizens and leadership engagement in the nation. Joining us, we have
Rinsola Abiola, who is the SSA to the President on Citizenship and Leadership. Good morning.
Good morning.
And
Thank you very much for
joining
having me.
us. Well, I just want to give just a brief profile. So Rinsola is an active member of the All Progressives Congress and a pioneer member of its youth and women's wing. She's also a founding member of the party's Young Women's Movement and was appointed as one of 3 youth representatives to the party's Board of Trustees in 2015, in keeping with her sustained advocacy for the full recognition of young women as equal stakeholders in the political youth movement. She made history in 2022 as the first woman to vie for the position of the APC National Youth Leader. I love seeing women in politics, women making moves, particularly young women.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you for all you do, and congrats on your appointment.
Thank you very much, and for the great work that you do as well.
Rita. Let's break it down for Nigerians. Your position was created, and it's the first of its time, so you're constantly making history, which is really commendable.
Thank you.
But what's the picture when we talk about citizens and leadership within your portfolio?
So essentially, my office has been created to promote civic education, which we all know is very important, and then, of course, youth leadership development. So this is an administration that understands the key importance of young people when it comes to nation building, when it comes to governance. We have the bulk of the population, and so it's very key that youth development initiatives get the proper attention and are properly invested in by the administration. So what my office does, as I said, is to promote civic education amongst our young people. And as you rightly noted, during the last election cycle, it was a very hot one. So those of us in the APC especially can attest to how hot it was. But, you know, elections have been won, and now we're on to governance. And when you're governing, Nigeria is a country for everybody. So we're making sure that we, you know, extend a hand of friendship to our young people across the aisle, both those in other political parties, those who are non-partisan. But the need for civic education is underscored by the fact that a lot of young people have passion. They want the country to be better. They want things to be different. But they're not very informed about the proper ways to engage and to ensure that, you know, there's adequate attention on issues of public concern. So that's where the issue of civic education comes in. Civic education is focused on enlightening citizens about our civic responsibilities, about our civic duties, about our duties to the country. Because it's not just about what Nigeria can do for us. It's also very important that we begin to think about what we can do for the country and how we can improve our environments, how we can relate better with fellow Nigerians, how we can ensure that we're not constituting anything in any way that could make life more difficult for our neighbors. So civic education is very key because we all have a responsibility to our country. We have to imbibe the right set of values. You know, it's very important that we have our young people raised with the right set of values, because that gap has been noticed, and it's very important that we do something very urgent about it. So that's what my office is tasked with doing. And then, of course, youth leadership development. One thing I've noticed, or one thing I'm thankful for, is that I've had the chance to learn from quite a number of mentors, especially in the political space. But you know, there's that gap as well for a lot of young people who are not able to learn from others who have come and been active before them. They just know they're interested in politics, or even within their individual spheres of endeavor, whether it's business, whether it's whatever they're doing within their community. Leadership is something that I believe there has to be a deliberate effort to prepare people for. You don't just stumble upon it. So if you've been adequately prepared for leadership, it shows in how you're able to handle things when you get to those elevated positions. So we're also doing what we can to ensure that our young people have leadership training programs, and that leadership training is a lot more accessible to young people. Now, there's a parastatal in the Ministry of Youth Development. So, you know, we recently had the Ministry of Youth created separated from the Ministry of Sport. And that's because President Bola Ahmed Tinubu believes that young people are important enough to have a ministry actually just focused on them. It's a very key demography. So we have to do everything we can to ensure that youth issues get the needed focus and attention from this administration, apart from just lumping it up with sports and then not, you know, concentrating more on sports at the detriment of youth development. So we have two parastatals under the Ministry of Youth. There's a National Youth Service Corps, which we're all familiar with. And then there's a Citizenship and Leadership Training Center, which a lot of people might not really be familiar with. But when I say Manowar organization, I'm sure you know what Manowar is.
Yeah.
So that's the parent body of Manowar. And my office, as I'm sure you can already tell, SSAP, Citizenship and Leadership, I also supervise that agency to see how we can reform it and make it a lot more active, because that agency has a very key role to play in youth development. It's an agency that teaches young people, right from, you know, they have training programs suited to different ages, teaches them about patriotism, their civic responsibilities, their morals, how to relate with their parents, you know, respect for parents. You know, it's an agency that does the work of building the youth in every sense of the word. So my office right now is in the process of instituting the needed reforms to make that agency more active, and to do that we're seeking the support of the legislature so that we can repeal and reenact the bill establishing that agency. It was created in 1951, so you can imagine, you know, what it looks like, you know, at that time and now. So we're trying to bring that agency back on board, to make it fully active, to empower that agency to be able to fully deliver on their mandate, which is to promote civic education, train our young people at different levels of, you know, different levels of the youth demography, and to also promote youth leadership development.
Yeah, I would like to know what specific initiatives or strategies is your office undertaking to enhance this civic education?
Okay, so firstly, as I mentioned earlier, my office is very focused on strengthening the CLTC, which is the Citizenship and Leadership Training Center. My role is largely advisory. I do not have implementing power, so to speak, but then I supervise an agency that can actually deliver on what actually needs to be done with training young people, and they also have the resources through the instrumentality of the budget to be able to deliver on those training programs. So right now, my office is working to, first of all, make their training modules more accessible to young people. And then if you look at it, there are lots of leadership training organizations in the country right now. I actually volunteer for one of them, and that's about political leadership for young people especially. But the CLTC trainings don't really have much in terms of subscription, and that's because there's really no incentive attached to it. And then, of course, publicity for the agency itself. So while we're working to strengthen the agency through the law and ensure that the training becomes mandatory for certain classes of young people, it's also important that we help them make their trainings more accessible to a wider audience. So we're working on the website, trying to see how we can make the site a lot more functional, so young people can at least access training programs by the center, pending the time that we have the needed legislative reforms to really strengthen it and institutionalize those reforms. And then my office, I'm very particular about civic engagement as well. Before I went into mainstream politics, I used to be quite active within the youth activism space. And even after going into politics, I've mostly worked at the intersection of politics and civil society. So I come from a background that prioritizes civic engagement. For instance, in the past month, which was Women's Month, my office came up with an idea which apparently was the first of its kind, even though I didn't realize it at the time. It was a Young Women's Leadership Conference. And the reason why we did that, thank you very much. It was so well attended, I was so surprised. So the reason why we did that was because it was Women's Month, right? And my office is not a gender office, but it is a youth office. And so we thought to explore the nexus between gender and youth development. And, you know, the Young Women's Leadership Conference came about. So we explored young women's leadership across 3 critical sectors, politics and governance, business and tech, and then youth and student-led movements. And the reason for convening that conference was because we wanted to hear from that particular demography, young women, what has been your experience with public institutions? We got to talk about the police as well. How do we, as young women, engage the police? In what ways do we want the interaction and the engagement to be better? The public institutions that we have, are they responsive enough to the needs of young women? Because this is a listening administration. And if you're going to design policies or if you're going to influence policies, it's important that you understand the perspective of those that you want to influence those policies for. So we had young women come together from different sectors. A number of young men joined us as well, he for she's, and it was a very enlightening conversation because we were able to really understand the perspective of our young women across those different sectors. Politics and governance, for instance, we spoke about the barriers to participation, what we need to do, how can we enable, further enable young women's political participation, of which I must say this administration has done really well in bringing young women into key positions where they can influence policies and even, you know, implement those policies as well. So I'm very thankful for the fact that we have a president who is gender sensitive and who is also very youth friendly. And I'm hopeful that our leaders at state level as well can borrow a leaf from that and replicate that within their states. Because, you know, when we have this happening at the federal level, it's very important that we replicate the youth leadership development and inclusion at the state level as well. So that's that for the Young Women's Leadership Conference. And I'm very particular about another thing, which is that we have a lot of conferences. Right, and beyond just talking, it's important that we act on the resolutions that we come up with at these conferences. At that conference, we made the decision to make it a yearly engagement. And the aim is to have a situation where when we convene that conference next year, by God's grace, we can tell them we discussed this and this and this in 2024. And this is what the office has done towards, you know, ensuring that the recommendations you made have been acted upon. So we're now in the process, we're back to the drawing table, taking all those recommendations, putting them together, and ensuring that we engage the necessary officials, the necessary arms of government on the different concerns that were raised and how to solve them. Because again, you have to think about solutions and you have to think about how to make things actually better and to actually work to implement the resolutions that we made. And another thing, of course, that we dwelt on was the fact that if we're really trying to help our young women generally, to be better placed in Nigeria as a country, we need to revisit the issue of the gender bills that were thrown out by the previous assembly. And thankfully, I would say that I've enjoyed immense cooperation and support from the House Committee on Youth Development. And once the House reconvenes, by God's grace, I will be going to engage on the feedback that I believe will fall under the purview of the legislature. And then, of course, engage other key government agencies. We had a number of partners, NASENI, NITDA, CAC, CLTC, NYSC within government. And then, of course, there was UN Women, UNODC from the development partners. So we're carrying on with this partnership and with this conversation to see to it that the outcome of that particular engagement with that particular demography is actually, you know, we take steps to work towards actualization of the feedback that we got. The office also has a number of other projects in the works. We have aligned with a number of partners as well. There's Leap Africa that we're working with on a youth leadership development program. And again, it's focused on bringing our young people together and helping them fine-tune the skills that they need to actually deliver on impactful leadership within their respective domains, and of course also grooming our young people for public service. And then of course other areas of concern include access to justice. Others include, you know, properly engaging our student population in a way that helps them also develop their skills and their talents. So it's a youth development office. It's an office that is focused on promoting civic education and leadership development. And I'm very thankful that I'm able to bring my experience to bear in the discharge of my duties. And of course, I've enjoyed immense support and cooperation from the leadership of the Ministry of Youth as well, Dr. Jamila Baum Ibrahim, who is a minister, and Honorable Olawande Ayodele, the Minister of State, the PAMSEC, the heads of the agencies in the Ministry of Youth, because my office is domiciled there. So it's just been a really great work experience. I'm thankful for the opportunity, and I'm really hopeful that we're able to deliver on all of this and more for the young people in this country.
First of all, I want to commend this administration for its appointment of young people and
Thank you.
women into governance, and that's something we talk about a lot
Yeah.
here. The last time I saw that actively being done was in 1999. For the likes of you, have followed your work since 2014 when
Thank you.
we're
I'm
getting young
flattered.
people to vote.
Yeah.
And then it was APC, PDP, and then 2018 we were all on the streets and everywhere
Not too young
talking
to
about
run.
not too young to
Yes,
run.
yes.
So that's something I know. I also see the likes of Dr. Jamila, who I've known and seen people. So it's no longer one of those things we hear. I
Yeah.
see people like Khalil at Naseni
Yes, he's doing a great job, by the
doing a
way.
great job.
Yeah.
I saw the young man who got appointed yesterday for the Consumer Credit
He's 36 years old.
Protection, exactly,
Yeah.
Smidan and the likes. And so for some of us who have gone from activism to advocacy to politics and development and what different things we do, I found out that one of the most successful campaigns we've worked on and seen was the Not Too Young to Run
Yes.
bill brought into law because it brought that nexus between activism and advocacy.
Yes.
Right now, we have a lot of activism going on and very little advocacy. And this now falls on you.
Yes.
Because, yes, there are the bits we can do for the privileged few, there are the bits we can do for the educated ones. But technology is a gift and a curse. How can we build the spirit of citizenship? Nigeria, we give ourselves the worst PR.
We do.
We do. Like, we've all been privileged to go to different countries. And you find that most of those countries is packaging.
Yes.
We give ourselves
Absolutely.
really bad.
Yeah.
How can you advise young people especially to toe the road of advocacy while being passionate about things, we're being passionate, and to also preserve the pride of being a citizen, like we saw during the AFCON competition?
Yes, yes. So I would say youth is synonymous with passion. When you're young, you think you have all the answers, you know everything, you know how to do everything.
Yep.
If they're not doing it right, you can tell them, no, this is wrong. But you know, knowledge is what actually what helps us. Knowledge is what enables us to channel our passions properly. So what I would enjoin the young people to do is sign up for courses that actually help you learn how to properly engage with the system. And in our respective domains, especially for those in our respective states, if you have an issue with a certain thing, find out who exactly is in charge of that thing and then work to engage them. You can write, you can organize yourselves to engage, whether it's your local government chairman, whether it's your councillor, whether it's your legislator representing your constituency, even at the federal level. It's one thing to be discontent about things. It's another to actually do the needful when it comes to engagement. And that's why civic engagement is key. For me, what actually informed my decision to join mainstream politics, even though initially I really didn't want to, was because I figured there's just so much that one can do as an armchair critic, so to speak, if you join the system. There's no perfect system anywhere, but if you join the system, you're able to influence it from within, and it's a gradual process. So having that understanding actually helps a great deal. I think I mentioned earlier that I volunteer for one of these leadership development trainings, and then I've noticed that in interacting with a lot of our young people, the kind of questions they come with, and apparently sometimes some of them, when they see my name, they're like, oh, why did you put this APC lady here? So you can already feel the, when they want to engage. But then, you know, the way they come in is not the way they leave, because along the line they learn things, and then, you know, it broadens their horizons, it changes their perspective, it teaches them to be more effective when they engage. So we're not saying don't criticize, it's within your right, it's a democratic government. You can speak your mind, you can hold your government to task, in fact you should. That's what ensures that the government stays on its toes. And there's one thing the president has proven since he got sworn in, it's that he's a man who listens and who actually cares about the welfare and the well-being of Nigerians. So by all means, criticize us, let us know what the gaps are, what we need to do differently. But it's also important that in conveying our message, we follow the right channels to ensure that those messages are received by the right people who are constitutionally empowered to actually do something about it. For instance, the reason why there's a lot of pressure on legislators, for instance, is because people expect from them things that aren't really their job. So, there's a lot of enlightenment that needs to be done about who is responsible for what along the line of governance and administration. So perhaps if we're able to understand that, if we're able to address governance and politics and voting from an enlightened perspective, from an informed perspective, it will really help with how we engage our leaders and how we're able to get results based on those engagements. So I would encourage young people, there are lots of even non-profit organizations that are offering these trainings, even if maybe you don't want to pay. There are non-profit organizations that offer these trainings. You can apply. If you're selected, you can go through that process. And there are lots of fellowships these days focused on youth leadership development, not necessarily even in politics alone, but many of them have to do with public service. Many of them have to do with politics and governance. Many of them have to do with general community development and leadership. Apply for these things and learn from them. And I would also like to urge those of us who are young people who have, perhaps garnered some experience within the system to also try to share what we know and what we've learned with other young people, particularly at the grassroots.
Besides just saying, "Nah, God."
Yeah, exactly, because it's very important that we engage our people.
Yeah.
And another thing is mentorship, right? I don't think mentorship has to be between somebody much older and someone much younger alone. Peer mentoring is also very key because there's a way you can relate with your peers that you maybe cannot really relate with older people. I've done quite a lot of work on young women's mobilization since I joined the party, and there was a time that we set up this mentorship program, very official. We attached members of the group to older women politicians, and many of them really, with no prejudice to anyone, but the experience wasn't really so smooth for a lot of them because they couldn't really relate. And at a point for some of them, it felt like they were bugging the mentors that they were attached to. So I've actually found that it's easier for young people to learn from other young people like them. They're more accessible. They speak the same way. They can understand the same thing. You can be more casual with somebody who's your mate without them saying you're being so disrespectful. So it's a bit easier to learn from somebody who is closer to you in age. So I think we also have to play our part to mentor our peers if they've shown interest at actually learning the ropes and learning about the process. And within the political parties, I know now the party has a progressive institute. Things of that sort would actually help to help people sharpen their skills and to develop the skill set that they need for leadership development. And at CLTC, we're working on being able to deliver these trainings and tailoring them to different subsets of the population so that whatever it is that they learn, whatever it is that they subscribe to is useful for them and it's truly impactful.
Okay, before Didi asks her next question, I just want to add to what you said because I had planned to ask you about mentorship, and so you've answered it. But there's a twist you brought to it, which I think is 100% correct. Peer mentorship, especially for some of us who are millennials. We saw from no technology to technology. We saw from people not having a voice to people having a voice. So we've witnessed these changes invented. We've seen it develop and advance. And so we are better placed to say, oh, we knew how this was without it. We know how it is with some of these privileges which we now have. And it's easier for people within a closer age range to speak about things they know of. So there are some things which the older generation never had to deal with. And so they're still learning as it is. But we have the privilege of seeing it start and evolve, and so we need to do more within our own groups to educate and enlighten people. Mentorship is something I never cared about, but now that you put it this way, it actually does make more sense because, especially as Africans, most mentors see us their a major subordinate who is like, do this for me, an errand boy, an errand girl, or most young people just want, what can I get from this? It's not building a relationship.
That's a very serious one. One about what can I get? Because a lot of people sometimes, they approach others for mentorship, and then the next thing you know, they're saying, I want a visa, or they expect things that don't really make sense, or they want you to put their name forward for things that you're not really sure of their capacity yet, and then they're coming to you and it just looks like it's what they can get out of it. So there's just a lot of balance that needs to be done. And the experience about the errand boy, errand girl thing, one, I can't relate to that. To be sincere. And then two, we also need to put our culture into consideration. So there are things sometimes that I probably can't relate to it because for mentors that I've had who are much older, there are things that I would naturally do as a result of my disposition, my upbringing. I'm a Yoruba woman, you know how we are. So it never really felt like an errand to me because they didn't even have to ask me for me to be able to do those things. It's also important that, when you service is an act of learning in itself, and by learning, if you want to learn from a person, if you can make things easier for them, I don't see any reason why you shouldn't. But I think when there's a larger age gap, maybe that might be an issue. But again, I can't really relate to that. But then with peers, I think it should be a lot easier to relate with each other.
So accountability is something we speak about a lot on
Yeah.
this show. So among other interesting things you've said, you mentioned that next year's conference, there'll be reflections of everything discussed from this year, which is a way to hold yourself, your office, and the conference in general accountable.
Yes.
So how do we hold young people in government accountable? Because we speak a lot about the old people, they've been there, they've done this, they've done that. How do we hold these young appointees accountable?
Monitor them. It's really that simple. Monitor them. And if you think anybody is not doing their job or is not living up to expectations, say it. Point it out. Anybody who is in public office should know that part of the job, you know, it comes with the territory. You will be criticized. You are open to people sharing their opinion. If we're here, it's because we can handle it. So as citizens have a right to service delivery as well. It's like when you're buying a service from a company and they're not delivering as expected, you're within your right as a consumer to call their attention and say, this is not what we bargained for. Say you buy data from a company and your data is flying out and
Use
you're wondering what's
electricity
going
as
on.
an example.
Yes, hold them. Ensure that you're in that band A.
Yes,
Very,
I'm sure
very
you're in band
certain.
A.
Yes. If you have to be tracking the hours that you get power, please do it. So it's very important that we hold our people accountable. It's important that you have clarity about their job. Engage them. I've had people come at me online to say, oh, we only see pictures, we don't see work. And, you know, sometimes, occasionally, when I actually do have the time, I take out time to respond to such people. And usually it's like, oh, okay, I'm sorry. Like, okay, I understand now, I understand better. So I believe in engagement. It probably has to do with my own background being in public relations. But I think engagement is very key. And being in public office is covenant sort of between you and the people. So if my principal has been elected by Nigerians and then he has appointed me, then definitely I have to give an account of my stewardship to the people. And that applies to everybody else in public office. So it comes with the territory. If you have any issues or if you think there's something someone has promised, could be your legislator, could be your governor, could be your legislator, federal or state, anybody, tackle them, so to speak. But you know, it's just very important that we're engaging from a place of knowledge. For instance, if you go to a legislator and say, you haven't built the road in front of my house, it's not your legislator's job. They do it because of the pressure, but ordinarily it should not be their job. So it's also very important that the people we're asking to do these things are people who are actually empowered to deliver on those things, which is where the civic education comes in, because that enables you to know who to hold responsible for certain things. People will be in their states. Maybe the state has really poor business environment, and as a result of that, they're not attracting enough businesses, or businesses are shutting down, and then they begin to fire the president. How about your governor? How about your council chair? How about your state assembly? You know, how about your commissioners? There are people at every level, you know, at every level of governance who are supposed to handle these things. So it's important that when you engage, you're engaging the person who is actually answerable for what you're engaging on. Yes, everything stops at the president's table, but within states, we have our leaders. I'm very big on people engaging their state's leaders a lot more, because one thing I've found with Nigerians is, if there's a problem, if they're going within their state and they hit a pothole, it's about, this government, this president, this renewed hope, I don't even know what is renewing. But you know, you're not really holding the people who are meant to answer to you accountable. So it's like a lot of the time, there are people that leaders at other levels get away with murder, so to speak, and then people are putting a lot of pressure on the presidency, which is fine, but also like apply that pressure to your leaders at those levels as well. Know who they are, understand the importance of your local council elections, for instance. You also need to do your due diligence. Okay, so local governments have allocation that comes to them. Do they receive it? What do they do with it? Like all this, at each level of government, there are resources made available. And you as a citizen have a right to know what is going on. So one, firstly, enlighten yourself about the roles and responsibilities of everybody along that governance chain. And two, know how to engage them. If you're going to write, some people are very active online. I remember when I think Malam Nasir was governor of Kaduna State, people would make comments about something not being right in Kaduna, and he would respond on Twitter and tag the official that's supposed to take care of it. So it also helps sometimes if you know which of the platforms your people are more active on, so you know where to reach them, how to engage them. And social media is very key. Social media is also very important, but it's important that as we're using social media, we're not spreading fake news, we're not doing things that could destabilize the country, we're not promoting divisive rhetoric, we're not promoting hate, we're not promoting ethnic hatred. it's very important that we use social media responsibly and to communicate responsibly. And when we're holding our leaders accountable, it's very key that we're responsible about it as well. There's this commissioner in Lagos State now, the Commissioner for Environment, I think, as an example, he's also very responsive on Twitter. If he draws attention to an infraction within your area, before the end of that day, you will find officials respond from that ministry. So it's very key that we engage our leaders properly.
Rinsola, before I let you go, one last question. At the end of it all, what would you like your legacy to be? What would you want to be remembered for?
So for me, it's about public service, and it really is service to the people. I would want to be remembered as somebody who gave their all to serve the country, somebody who was fair to other people, to whether it's male, female. I have a very obvious bias for women. I've never hidden it. But because of that, I'm usually very careful to ensure that whatever it is that I do, I'm not too skewed to one side against another. So I try. And then my religion commands fairness. So it's something that I hope that if, when I'm no longer here, like so many who have passed before me, people remember that truly she brought those values of fairness and being just into the work that she did in the public space.
Rinsola Abiola, thank you so much for this conversation. You have a platform here. As you can see, this is youth-led. This is all us. This wasn't
scripted. The viewers won't get tired of seeing me.
Please, this is what we're here for. Always reach out when you have things you want to promote, such as within your line of work. Please come. That's why we are here, and we're very pro-development. We just want things to work. Talking about things to work, we've been talking about electricity in the last 1 week. It's extremely important to note that some agencies are actually doing their work. The National Electricity Regulatory Commission has an application out, which is called the Power Outage Reporting System. I downloaded it and I've tried it, where you can log when you have power outages and if it has been resolved or not. And it also helps you know what band you are on and the likes. It's there, it's available, it's free. So this would help them get the right data and work better. So check it out, and this is free. We weren't paid to say this, but it's important that we know that it's called the Power Outage Reporting System. Use it also helps you keep them accountable and get better service. Once again, Rinsola,
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for coming.
it's a pleasure.